Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Custom Question Builder. My name is Danny Shapiro, and I'm on the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. Our speaker today is Professor Nathaniel Raak. Professor Raak is an instructor of mathematics at Mitchell Technical College in Mitchell, South Dakota. He received his bachelor's degree in mathematics from Northwestern College and his master's in mathematics from the University of South Dakota. Professor Raak has 9 years of experience teaching entry-level math courses and is always looking for applications his students will find interesting. In his spare time, he enjoys biking, reading, playing board games with his family. He currently resides in Mitchell, South Dakota with his wife and their 4 children. Also on the webinar today is Jen O'Brien of Hawks, one of our courseware implementation specialists. She's here to help answer questions throughout, so please enter those into the Q&A as we go. And we're excited to have you today, Professor Raak. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Danny. So, like Danny said, today I'm going to be taking a look at question builders, specifically why I chose to use one, then how I went about the process of incorporating one, and some things I learned along the way. To give you a little bit of an idea of the setting that this took place in, I already mentioned it, but I teach at a place called Mitchell Technical Institute or college. We're actually right in the process of a name change, so it's kind of one or the other right now. But we have 2-year associate degree and diploma programs, and then we have a little more than 1,000 students, and it took place in a class called Mathematical Reasoning, which I've seen other schools call quantitative literacy, or also I've seen discovering mathematics as another name for it. But basically, to give you an idea, it was a class that was an entry-level math class for a general education requirement. A lot of students were taking it, and much past this class, they didn't really intend to pursue specific math classes much beyond this class. So that's where it took place in. To give you a little bit of an idea of why the process started, on the left-hand side here, I have concepts that they were seeing in a general education math class, in that mathematical reasoning class. These concepts are just one of many that they were seeing. In a way, these concepts should have been a review already from something they had seen in high school, but they were seeing these concepts in their general education math class, and we'd get done with the semester, then they'd go on to their program-specific class, and they would see something that would look kind of like this. Now, when I look at what's on the left and what's on the right, I see almost the same thing, but what you see on the right is actually, students were supposed to be finding a cross-sectional area for a weld fill. And they came out of a welding economics class. The welding students had already taken the general education math class. They were put into this welding economics class, and now suddenly they saw something that looked completely different to them. So even though from my point of view or my perspective, the content looked the same, it was just packaged a little bit differently, students were not seeing that. And so in the general education class, they were a lot of times grumpy. I was getting asked multiple times, when am I ever going to use this? Why do I have to use this? Why do I have to be able to do this? And then they were going to their program class, and a lot of times program instructors were ending up reteaching what was happening already in a general education class. And so what I started doing, I started basically trying to get a feel for if this was just limited to, like this example came from a welding program, but is this just limited to one program? Is it more programs? And as I started talking to other instructors, usually it was an informal process. We would either be before a faculty meeting or walking across campus or something to that nature. I would just ask, what type of math do you utilize in your programs? And I started compiling lots and lots of questions. And with those questions, this is just another example of a problem that I had gotten from another instructor. The concept that would get used to solve this problem, again, it was a concept that we were reviewing in the general education class, but students weren't making the carryover, the transfer to their program classes. And so I had started making sort of a stockpile of a lot of these questions, working with other instructors. And I was using these problems not really to create a program specific class, but more as extensions to the general education concept. So if I knew I had students from a particular program in a class, or I had groups of students from different programs in a class, I would kind of tailor these extension problems to the type of students that I had in the class, the type of programs that were represented in those classes. And so they might be questions that they had to answer before they left. They might be like a take home worksheet. They might be group questions, but something to that nature where it was more or less extensions of the regular coursework. And in watching students work together, maybe in groups or even helping students myself one-on-one, we would a lot of times get to the end of a question, they would have the answer, and I knew that I had given quite a bit of assistance along the way. And so even if I did something simple like change these numbers, it was kind of a struggle to get through it the second time. But maybe like by the third time, they were pretty comfortable with it and doing quite well with it. So I realized in a problem such as this, if I just change those two numbers with the red arrows, now I have a different iteration of the question. It would really be nice if I could generate a lot of these questions. And so in the back of my head, I was trying to figure out how I could somehow incorporate something like Microsoft Excel, because I knew in Excel I could generate the numbers. And in this case, what you're seeing there is just the answer to this question. But I could generate the numbers. I could have Excel answer the question really for me. All I needed to do was figure out how I could have students enter this number here. And when I generated the numbers, I could do it incrementally, like I had programmed or set up here, or I could also use random generators. It didn't, just kind of depended on the type of the question. But with this Excel idea in my head, I was still trying to figure out what's a way that I can make this question with these different iterations accessible to students where they can enter their own answers. And about that time is when somebody from Hawks had contacted me and they started talking about this question builder. And as I probed a little bit about what the question builder could do, eventually we got to this point where what I have circled here is what they call the variable manager. And what I understood was I would be able to create things in Excel, create numbers in Excel, dump them into this variable manager, and then I would be able to present the questions to students in a way that they could enter their answers. So it would save me time grading. And then also that that it would be in just a way that students could easily access and then get different iterations of the questions. Keeping in mind this whole time, these questions are really supposed to just be extension questions that would help connect the general knowledge to the program specific knowledge. So I wasn't creating specific program classes. I was just trying to come up with a format that I could easily get uh, extension questions to students. So that's when I saw what Hawks could do in combining what I could do with Excel into a format that was student friendly, I decided to go with it. And when I decided to go with it, some steps I went through to actually incorporate it physically into the class. The very first thing I did was I connected with a training representative. So they showed me more detailed kind of how to use the question builder in Hawks, showed me some of the steps, some of the options. And then maybe as with any sort of a training with new software or something, I knew I had missed some things. I knew there were parts that I hadn't fully understood. So then I went out and I found the user manual. The user manual is really was kind of a key component after meeting with a training representative, because in the user manual I really had things laid out very nicely, some step-by-step instructions for how to utilize the particular software. And with those two things kind of in my toolbox to use, then really what I ended up doing was a lot of trial and error. And to do the trial and error, what I did, I just split my screen. So on the left-hand side, I would have my instructor account with the question builder pulled up. On the right-hand side of my screen, I would have the student account pulled up. So as I was trying different settings in the instructor account and trying to figure out what they would do for the student, I would have the student side pulled up so that I could immediately see what was happening on the student end. So try a setting, save it on the instructor side, go to the student side, see what happened. And that's really the process that I ended up doing. Some things I learned through that process. The very first thing was that the initial time investment was significant. The first few questions I made took a fair amount of time, made me question whether or not this was actually the best thing in the world to do. But with practice, this time has decreased greatly. So that's one of the things that I learned. Now, when I make a question, I can almost make a question in Hawks with multiple iterations as fast as I would be able to make that question in something like a Word document and manually solve it with an answer. So initially, a lot of time, but now it's very quick. If I get a new question I want to make, it's really quite streamlined. The second thing I had to learn was what I call rounding and tolerances. So if you remember back to where I had the Excel snapshot of an Excel sheet, if I change numbers and I increase numbers incrementally, I have to make sure that those numbers are changing incrementally big enough that it doesn't cause problems later on. And I also have to make sure if I have something that has multiple steps in Excel, that I'm not rounding somewhere where later on that could cause some problems with tolerances. I also had to keep this in mind with students. So in the question builder, when I would do like the free response answer and the advanced options, I had to think about this a little bit in terms of a tolerance and how accurate it was to make sure that if students were doing a process correctly, they somehow didn't get an issue with the rounding. So they weren't getting questions wrong because of rounding. It was more of an issue of the process was something wrong. So, and just to give you an idea, in Excel, where I had some problems with the rounding and I guess what I call tolerances, I had something set up with trigonometry, and what ended up happening is just because of the way I had generated the numbers and how close together I had put those numbers when I generated them, the hypotenuse ended up being the same side or the same length as a second side of the triangle, which obviously caused some problems. I also learned in doing this that cut, copy, and paste automatically adjusts rows. So when I originally started, if I had 50 rows in my Excel sheet, I would be using this button right here to make sure that I had the right number of rows in my variable manager. With time and just out of basically an accident, I found out that if I copy the information from Excel and then I paste it into the variable manager, as long as I have the right number of columns, the rows would automatically adjust for me. So that was another thing that saved me quite a bit of time that I learned. And then I also learned to be a little bit careful with division by zero and blank cells. And I can kind of show you what I mean here. So in this case, when I had generated some numbers in Excel, what I was actually trying to do for this particular problem is I was trying to generate mixed numbers, and these mixed numbers were supposed to be incrementally increasing by in this case, 1/4 inches. So I started off with like 1 1/4 inch and then 1 1/2 inches. And I would keep increasing by 1/4 inch increments. And what happened was when I would get to a whole number, these two cells would be blank. Well, which makes sense, except for in the format that I had, then this would read like a 0 divided by 0. And although that might be sort of a fun topic to talk about in the right circle of friends, it's not exactly the most exciting thing when students are trying to enter answers. So I had to be a little bit careful with having blank cells and how I was trying to program the variable manager in relation to the question builder. So those are just some different things I learned. I also came across some benefits that I guess in hindsight, it makes sense why these things happened, but I wasn't necessarily expecting them. I was really just looking for students to make a better crossover from the general education class to their program class. And one of the unexpected benefits, it just helped promote collaboration with colleagues just by the nature of what I was doing, where I was seeking them out to try to find what type of things are actually happening in their program. It just created collaboration. And I never really had much trouble trying to find other instructors that didn't want to work with me. So they were excited. They were usually helpful, and so it just created a good working environment. Also, it greatly decreased grading time and also prep time. So obviously now I'm not grading near as much as I necessarily was before. And when I say it greatly decreased prep time, now sometimes instead of creating like a worksheet for students, I might just create like a quiz and dump those questions into the quiz. So now a lot of times instead of typing things out, it's more or less a process of clicking a few circles and then inserting the questions into an assignment, which also makes changing the curriculum for different classes a lot easier as well. So if I want extension questions of one type for a class, I can put those into a class and I can remove them for the next class. And so it really decreases my prep time a lot, which makes it much easier to spend time more with some of the analytics and seeing where students are actually having trouble. It also, this past semester, made a transition to online easier. And just because I already had stuff electronically, it also helped with student buy-in. I'm not hearing those questions near as much, like when am I going to use this, or why do I have to know this? Because now I'm actually showing them. And then it also overall has increased student performance. So I was a little bit nervous about doing this with word problems, because typically these type of students aren't too excited about word problems. But it actually, when I look at pretest scores and final exam scores and tracking the increase, the percent increase that students have semester by semester, it actually, they're outperforming students that I wasn't using this question builder with. And so we also have tracked a little bit with some of our nursing students on some of the standardized ATI tests that they use, just to see how the cohort that's in the class using this question builder compares to students that don't take this class. And overall, it has increased their performance. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Rock. Want to encourage our audience to use that question and answer box to submit any questions that you might have. I want to ask you to kick off the question and answer section, how your students have been adapting to moving completely online, and can you talk a little bit about how that's been going this semester?
Really pretty good. One thing that I've heard other individuals say throughout the country is that they've been having some trouble with internet connectivity. And even though for whatever reason, we're in rural South Dakota. That has not really been an issue. So that hasn't posed very many problems for me. Really, moving to online, I found students that were doing work beforehand usually are still doing work. Students that were not so engaged in class beforehand still are not really too engaged. So that transition for students seemed to actually go pretty good.
Okay, thank you. And we have starting to get some questions here. Do you ask that students show their work when you have them do these questions?
Yes, if they so if it's in the classroom setting, then yes, they'll definitely be showing work. Um, if it's in the online setting, I usually no, unless they have a problem, then I ask to see their work and what they've done.
And Mackin has asked, he said he's never used Question Builder and wondering if you might feel comfortable walking through a short problem setup for us. And if that's something that we don't have the chance to do today, we can have somebody from Hawks walk you through one as well.
Um, that would be okay with me. How many questions are there?
We're starting to have a few, but I think it's
Yeah.
something that if you're able to open up the instructor side of the software and get into that for a minute, I think that's
Yep.
something that we could do.
Yep. So, are you able to still see my screen? Yeah. Maybe. So, just go to assignments and um, scroll down a little bit to my question builder, and then once it loads, so you can see my different folders that I've created these questions. So there's maybe all said and done somewhere between 50 and 75 questions if I do a rough count so far. But basically, if I just go into a question folder and then create a new question, let's say I wanted to do something like just something really simple, like I wanted to add integers. So I'm going to do 1 plus 3. That's what I want the students to do. But then, like I was saying earlier, I want those different iterations. So now to get those different iterations, what I would do, I would go to Excel and so I would just have Excel just create a number, and I can set it between 1 and 10 or whatever basically I want, and then equals another random number, maybe from this time 10 to 20. And now I've got it creating the random numbers. I want to make sure that I have the answer as well. So I'm going to add those two cells together. So I've got the two numbers that'll generate plus the answer. And now that I've got that, I could go up to 50 rows. I'll go up to 10. And I've got my different random numbers generated. I've got the answers. So I'll copy those. Then I'll go back over to my question. I'm going to go to that variable manager. And notice I have the right number of columns. I need more rows, but that's okay. I'm going to paste them into there. So now it automatically set it to the right number of rows. And I'm going to name it. So call it integer adding is what I'll name it. I'll save it. And now what I want to happen, so I want this number right here to come from my random generated ones. So I'm going to use column A. So the numbers from column A, I'll insert them there. I want to add on a number from column B. So again, I'm going to insert, see, I'm going to choose column B. I'm going to insert that. And then this is going to be the question. So now over here, I could do a variety of different things. So I'm going to choose free response, and they're going to enter their answer right here. I can add more directions up here if I want. I can add some labels here if I want, but I'm just going to keep just the answer. So the answers were in column C. So I insert those, and I'm going to save this. I'll save it as integer adding and low difficulty. Click on save. And now what I have this question. It has 10 different iterations of it. If I want to preview, so this right here is going to be what the students see, and they're gonna enter their answer right there. So there I've got my question built. And if I want new values, usually when I'm creating these, a lot of times I hit this new values quite a few times. I've checked my work most of the time in the Excel document, but it's nice to click this a fair number of times just to make sure that I'm not missing something. Invariably, it ends up something sometimes every once in a while, one particular iteration still gets missed, but students they help me out with that. So, yep. And there would be a question. And now if I go here, integer adding, here I've got my question, and I can add it into assignments, quizzes, and tests. So, yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Jen, I see we have 2 more questions in the Q&A. Can you jump in here on those 2 questions and address them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question is there a limit to how many questions you can have on a quiz or test, or how many custom questions that you're creating as an instructor? And there is not. So you can create and add as many questions as you want to a quiz, a test, or even our practice and certify assignments within Hawks. We do not limit you on that. And then the second question is there any way to collect a student's written work through Hawks, not through typing? So we do not currently have a file upload option in terms of collecting a student's work, but we do have options if you do want the student to type out their work. So as of right now, we have a show work feature. You can tie it to any question, so students typing in their work. We also have a smart review tool, and this is turned on by default for any English gradebook, whether it's Foundations of English or Composition. It is something we've turned on. We can, no extra cost to your students or your school. If you are interested in using it, we can turn it on for you. And we've done this, especially in some statistics courses, people will use this. And basically that allows students to type short answer responses as well, and you can comment and tag responses, create a grading rubric. So if you are wanting more of a word-based answer or sentence-based answer, that would work. And then Question Builder does have an open-ended option as well, so if you're wanting them to write their answers. But in terms of showing work, your best option right now is just turning on Show Work in Assignment Builder, where a student is typing in their thought process. It is on our radar for uploading a document, so hopefully that's coming down the road, and we can always keep you posted on that progress. And then I see a couple other questions came through. One is, can you modify a question already on Hawks? We do not currently have the ability to allow you to edit a Hawks question that's within Hawks, but if there's something, if there's a question type you're needing or wanting, please do reach out to your training and support representative. It's possible that that question exists in the format that you're wanting somewhere else where we're able to help you with it. We have a few different options with that. We can't always take care of everything, but we do our best. So do let your training rep know if there's something you're looking for in particular. And then somebody else asked, can you show work in math with variables and steps? Show work in math with variables and steps. I think that might be relating to my mention of the show work feature. I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding the question that's being asked with that, but if there is a multi-step question, I do believe that the show work turns on for each one of the steps. So if I didn't address that, feel free to type in a clarification, and I'm happy to address any other questions.
And Nora, we'd be happy to follow up by email with you as well to make sure your question is fully answered.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you both to Jen and to Professor Raak for the webinar today. We have hit our time limit, so I appreciate you taking us through, appreciate you as an audience participating with us and joining in. We did record this today, and we will be emailing you the recorded session. If you have questions, email us at marketing@hawkslearning.com. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.